Hi everybody.
Hello.
In this short video we're going to focus on backlighting. It's one of our favourite techniques for photographing wildlife. It's a wonderful way to make your images stand out and really draw attention to your subjects in your pictures.
Before that, a few words about ourselves. We've been professional wildlife photographers now for more than 20 years. We live here in Northumberland in the north of England, but we spend 4 or 5 months of every year photographing in southern Africa. We like to tell stories through our pictures, and we also lead safaris to some of our favourite locations in southern Africa. If you want to find out a little bit more about us, check out the link below.
So now we're going to look at our own approach to backlighting and give you a few tips and tricks on how to get better pictures.
And at the end of that, we'll look at 6 of our favourite pictures, give you a bit more detail. So please stick with us.
Backlighting works best when the sun is low, so around sun up or sundown is always a great time to look for these images. And winter, when the sun doesn't get so high in the sky, gives you longer periods of opportunity to do backlighting. There's the added bonus of dusty conditions sometimes too, and that adds loads of atmosphere, especially in the golden hour.
There's an extra benefit of shooting into the sun at the end of the day, and that's that you can shoot at higher shutter speeds. This shot of springbok in the Kalahari was taken way back in the days of film, when we were shooting Fuji Velvia, only 50 ISO. Yet even early in the morning we were able to capture a sharp image of fast-moving subjects. These days, with low noise, high ISO cameras, it's less of an issue, but in very low light, when you're struggling for shutter speed and have moving subjects, shooting into the sun can significantly extend your opportunities.
When you're shooting against the light, you're relying mainly on shape and form to communicate with the viewer. Backlighting reduces the detail you can see in your subject. If you're overexposing for a light, ethereal look, you won't have much contrast in the animal's features. If you're underexposing for a strong, moody, atmospheric feel, perhaps silhouetting or rim lighting your subject, you'll have even less detail, perhaps just an outline shape. So it's really important to keep things clean and simple. Just like a shadow puppeteer, your ideal subjects will be those with characteristic and iconic features and profiles. Think about big horns, large bills, spines, long snouts, a pronounced plume or a crest of feathers, long necks, and so on.
Hairy, furry and feathery subjects can be great for the backlit treatment, as the small gaps between hair and fur let the light through, creating a wonderful rim of gold around subjects. Look out as well for subjects with features that will let the light shine through completely, for example the almost transparent skin on the ear membranes of a rabbit, or a bird's wing feathers fanned out during flight.
There's a couple of other things to keep an eye out for that will help give your backlit shots an extra wow factor. Things like wispy grasses, fine-petalled flowers or feathery seed heads can all work really well because the near translucence of the surrounding vegetation gives your pictures even more of that golden sparkle. Mist, dust, water droplets with the sweet light shining through them is a bit like throwing a veil of gold over your subjects or sprinkling them with extra magic glitter. Check out water points where birds and animals go to bathe or splash about, or dry plains where subjects kick up clouds of dust when they interact or chase around.
The best backlit shots work because they clearly define the subject shape against richly saturated golden light. If your subject isn't distinct and clear of any confusing background, it's not going to work. So even where you've selected a great subject, you can still fail to produce a pleasing shot if your subject's shape is partially obscured due to poor positioning in the frame. Always make sure the outline of your subject isn't lost against a similarly dark foreground and that it stands proud of anything around it. Backlit groups can be very rewarding when you pull them off, but they are tricky because individuals in the group can get completely lost where their shapes overlap, making it confusing for the viewer. School yourself when photographing more than one subject to wait for isolation in the frame between at least some, if not all, of the subjects in the group.
There's no correct way of exposing for any backlit shot, mainly because backlighting is a creative approach to shooting wildlife. And at the end of the day, it's quite subjective. What works and what doesn't is often a matter of taste. With rim lighting, you're aiming to capture and heighten the glow of a golden halo around soft-edged subjects photographed against the light. It's possible to use your exposure setting creatively to convey a range of moods. from the pale rimlet fur of a young animal, suggesting its vulnerability, for example, to a darker, quite low-key shot of a predator on the prowl, suggesting danger. So if you want to create a graphic shot where the image is solely about your subject's rimlet outline, you'll need to dial in extra underexposure against what your camera meter suggests to really exaggerate it. If you want to retain more detail in the subject, you might even want to overexpose a little. Take care that highlights in the rimlet areas of your picture are not blown out.
Mastering backlighting techniques in wildlife is all about learning to judge how much exposure compensation to opt for, if at all, in any given setting. There are just two key things to consider: the mood you want to create in the finished image, and how much, if any, detail you want or require to achieve that. If you're lucky enough to be in a place that enables this, rim lighting using spotlights after dark can be very effective. For this to work with big game, you need two vehicles working cooperatively, taking turns to light the subject from behind. Obviously, it's essential to do this in a responsible way, putting the welfare of the animals first, but with habituated subjects such as leopards or lions, it can produce some striking results. You need to work quickly, as these opportunities are invariably fleeting and you don't want to be spotlighting an animal for very long. With our cameras set to manual mode, we typically start at settings of say 2000 ISO, f4, 1/200th of a second, then quickly check the first result and adjust from there.
For shooting silhouettes, shapes need to be even bolder and compositions more graphic, because to create silhouettes you need to intensify the contrast between light and dark areas in your image as much as possible and remove the detail in your subject completely. There are a number of approaches to getting the exposure right, but all of them rely to some extent on trial and error. Take a shot, check the exposure on the back of your camera, adjust and reshoot. You need to work quickly because subjects rarely stay put for long and the quality of light changes very rapidly at dawn and dusk. One approach with silhouettes is to meter off the sky, which will be much brighter than your subject. This should give you a good silhouette, but you might need to dial in additional underexposure to bring out the rich colours of the sunset or the dawn. You can simply meter the whole scene with evaluative or matrix metering and then dial in negative exposure compensation, or you can go fully manual, adjusting ISO, shutter speed and aperture until you achieve your desired effect. As we said, there's no single right way to do this. It's all about your personal vision combined with trial and error. Knowing your camera so that you can adjust settings quickly helps enormously. When a subject hangs around for long enough, we'll often try a range of exposures, bracketing so we can judge later which is most successful. And remember, while we always try to get the shot right in camera, you can always tweak your images in Lightroom or Photoshop to enhance the effect.
One thing to watch out for with backlighting is flare. Unless you're looking for a high-key 70s movie effect, this can be a real headache, especially when you're shooting into a low sun. Always use a lens hood, but also use natural cover such as a tree or rocks to cast a shadow over your lens. Shooting from the wrong side of a covered vehicle often works. If all else fails, try positioning yourself so a very low sun is right behind your subject. You can shoot backlit images with any lens, but because you generally want to avoid including the sun itself in your picture, unless it's a Red Bull on the horizon perhaps, it's easier with longer focal lengths and narrower fields of view. Most of our backlit shots are taken with lenses of 300mm or longer. Whatever you use, be sure to use that lens hood and take any extra precautions necessary to avoid flare. When shooting into the light in low light conditions, even the best lenses can struggle to autofocus. If you find your lens is hunting unsuccessfully, try locking onto the most contrasty part of your subject, its outline, then recomposing. Alternatively, you could try selecting multiple focus points. If your lens has a focus limiting facility, then selecting the narrowest appropriate range may also reduce hunting. Best of all is to resort to the good old-fashioned method of manual focusing.
So to finish up, we're just going to take you through 6 of our favourite backlit images.
Here's a picture of a male ostrich in the Kalahari that's just finished dust bathing. When they dust bathe, they create this enormous amount of dust, which makes it wonderful for shooting them against the light because it gives you this great gold halo of dust around your subject that really makes it pop. And you can increase the intensity of that by just underexposing a little when you shoot.
This cheetah was also in South Africa's Chobe National Park. We found it really early one morning just as the sun was rising. We try in our images not just to show what an animal looks like, but to try and evoke something of the sense of time and place and of how we felt when we were privileged to see this magnificent creature. We really quite liked the effect of the flare on this image, so while we normally avoid flare, in this case it sort of added to the atmosphere in a nice way.
When we find subjects with really strong shapes, a kind of switch goes on in our brain that we might be able to try to get a good picture of them, shooting them as silhouettes, as in this shot of two young male kudu sparring. They make a great silhouette because those horns and the hairs on their necks and then the grasses. And it's wonderful that they're actually on the edge of the shore and you can see them so clearly against the background of the water. And the thing that just makes it is when we got to the editing stage, putting it into black and white.
We were staking out a waterhole in KwaZulu-Natal when this white rhino emerged from the forest. We loved the effect of the backlighting through the dust, almost like a performer stepping out onto stage amid a cloud of dry ice. Rhinos can be quite hard to photograph because they often look quite bovine, but here the silhouette really gives a sense of his power and presence.
When we're shooting backlit subjects, we don't always make them centre stage in the frame. Sometimes it can look really quite powerful if you just offset them a little bit and show a wonderful sky and sunrise. It's also important though to get down low so that we could get that clear outline of the lioness as she sets off to look for the rest of the pride at sunrise.
For our final image, we're back in the Kalahari, another early morning encounter, this time with a brown hyena. We tracked the animal at a respectful distance for several kilometres. It was mainly walking in the shadow of the dunes, but every so often it would pass through a shaft of brilliant light. It's that wonderful light and the distinctive profile of the animal that make the image. But equally important are the small details, the raised forepaw, the pricked ears. It's those sort of details that can make the difference between an average picture and a good picture.
So thanks for watching. We hope you've enjoyed our video and we look forward to seeing you next time.